dream of, we need political will. And that's why I'm very grateful for the Minister from Sierra Leone. I'm very grateful for the Minister from Liberia. And shortly we'll be joined by the ministers from Gabon and also Uganda. But above all, I would like to thank the man who has appeared through the wonders of modern technology on the video screen today, His Excellency President Kenyatta. He was... Round of applause. Okay, thank you, that's great news. He is actually in Nairobi, where he is assisting in brokering the Ethiopian peace deal that we all desperately will occur, and we're very grateful that he's taken the time from that important work to join us here today. And it's very much testament to his commitment to this cause that he has done so. We worked with President Kenyatta for many years, and I know that he is a committed conservationist and thinks very deeply about the issues of sustainability, about the climate emergency and what is required in the years to come. And that is why we're so incredibly delighted that he's agreed to work even more closely with us as our first Giants Club climate change champion. And over the next year, work with all his political friends, both here in Africa and abroad, to be able to assist in facing the huge challenges that we all know exist. And I think that's all anyone wants to hear from me. And I will pass over to the people who matter, and specifically President Kenyatta. Thank you for doing this for us. Thank you for taking on this role, and we pass over to you now.
Thank you very much. And now over to you, Your Excellency.
To all the participants, all the attendees, and let me take this opportunity to wish you all a great good evening. As I take this opportunity to thank all friends at the Space for Giants and the children and youth at this pavilion for inviting me to participate in this event. And I can think of no more appropriate venue for me to be participating in, but being participant in that which will affect the future of our youth and young people across the globe, but most importantly, here on the African continent. Indeed, as is known to all, the average age on our continent is 19. I myself turned 61 less than a few days ago. But as far as I am concerned, I prefer to invert the numbers. And if I do, I think that might read 19. So I think I'm part of you, and I want to be part of you, and I want to encourage you, because it is you who shall be the definers, the defenders, the protectors of our globe, not for us, but for future generations to come. I'm sorry I wasn't really able to attend in person, but that is as a result of the fact that I'm currently engaged in the Ethiopian peace talks. This is an issue that is critical not only to my region, but also to the African continent, and an issue that I believe in one way or another, conflicts across our continent are associated with climate change, which is what you are engaged in discussing there in Sharm el-Sheikh. This time last year, I had the opportunity and honor to attend COP26 in Glasgow, at that time in my capacity as President of Kenya, where I made my views clear. Africa, a continent which contributes less than 3% of global emissions, is already bearing the brunt of the impact of climate change, a problem primarily created by the wealthy G20 group of nations. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't need to be an IPCC scientist to see that climate change is real. It is here with us, and it's getting worse day by day. Today, millions across our continent and in my region, especially of East Africa, are facing starvation because of a persistent 4-year drought. In just the last 8 years, it is estimated that around 700 million people across our continent have been displaced by water stress associated with climate change. And I have no doubt that this climate stress is a key driver to the conflicts affecting the continent. And it is also, as I said earlier, a key driver to the conflict that we are now trying to resolve in our neighboring country of Ethiopia. So, dear friends, while there are positive noises that have been made since we started off in Paris and continued on during COP26 last year, it is quite clear. Sorry, I think I've lost the video. It is quite clear that the global community, especially wealthy nations, have without doubt taken a step backwards from the promises and commitments that they have made over the years. The war in Ukraine also has perversely incentivized more oil and gas exploration rather than encourage the hope to renewable green energy that we had all hoped for. Self-preservation in the way of saving humanity and saving children from our greatest existential crisis in our history is being reversed. And there is new evidence pointing to just how far away the world's wealthy polluters are from reaching their promise to us of $100 billion annually to those from the South who are disproportionately affected by climate change in the global South. Some of us have been heartened by the legitimate voices of indignation expressed by the global South at this particular COP in Egypt, especially the voices of Africa, including from those of our brothers and sisters who come from the small island states. There is no group that is more disenfranchised by climate change than the young people, especially the young people from our continent and those from the small island states across the Pacific, the Caribbean, and the Indian Ocean. You can, as young people, be rightfully angry about the futures that are being stolen from you by those of us from my generation. Last year, I pointed out that Africa does not need to wait to be rescued by governments from wealthy nations, unable to move beyond the constraint of self-preservation. But we can instead work together and also employ the huge resources from great companies that control the world's trade and drive consumption that is also contributing to a warming planet. 25% of these companies have committed to going carbon neutral by the year 2030. And some analysts estimate that the difficulties of decarbonization will require some of these companies to purchase up to 2 gigatons of carbon credits. A tiny fraction of that exists in the marketplace today. This is not only great opportunity, but it is also a great hope for the young people of our continent. So friends and young people from across Africa and the world at large, herein lies the great opportunity for our continent and for the global youth. The restoration and management of Africa's great tropical forests, our savannas, our swamps, our mangroves, our coral reefs, all of our natural ecosystems, avoids and removes carbon emissions from the atmosphere, helping to combat climate change and the species extinction crisis. And by happy coincidence, these interventions create nature-based carbon credits, which are hugely coveted by those who want to offset their emissions. And that is why at last year's COP, I launched a major program with the Giants Club, and it's implementing charity Space for Giants to build the enabling environment in Africa for nature-based carbon credits in Africa. We are pleased to see that in so little time, this same initiative has resulted in the creation of a new company, Green 14, which has already built a pipeline of nearly 20 projects across 8 African countries, collectively involving the restoration of nearly 100,000 square kilometers of key ecosystems in partnership with government and local communities. Together, these projects will hopefully generate more than 100 million tons of carbon credits over the next 20 years and tens of thousands of jobs for you, the young people of our continent. Imagine if this initiative can be scaled up to all 8,400 protected areas across our continent. And this is just one element of the new green economy that can transform Africa's fortunes. So, ladies and gentlemen and dear friends, it is because of this incredible opportunity that I am proud today to have taken on the role of a climate champion for the Giants Club, who I believe are doing a great job for our continent and the world at large. Over the next year, I will be working with the Giants Club, Space for Giants, and Green 14 initiative to support our African governments to put in place the appropriate policy frameworks and transparency to attract transformational carbon finance. Friends will empower the creation of a new African industry, a green industry that would not only combat climate change, but will also enable a transfer of wealth from the global north to the global south. This to offset the immorality of climate change. This, I believe, is Africa's moment. But most importantly, I do believe that this is the opportunity for Africa's youth and young people. This is the opportunity for the future of young people across the globe. I look forward to working with like-minded individuals from across the globe to make this a reality. And we look forward to partners who will help us roll out this very noble initiative. I thank you, I wish you success, and I look forward to working closely with each and every one of you. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. We are really honored and we appreciate you giving us your time to share your experience. We'll appreciate it if you have the time to stay on for some questions and answers after we hear from our fellow ministers. Thank you.
That will be fine.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to hear from the ministers of Gabon, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. We are really thrilled to have them present with us. And now I'm going to pass on to Your Excellency, the Minister of Gabon.
Thank you. ministers, Your Excellency, it's great to see you. Ladies and gentlemen, how do I follow on from President Kenyatta? I think when we come to these negotiations, we're obviously fighting for climate justice. We're fighting to put pressure on the developed world to honor their commitments to finance. We're fighting to put pressure on the G20 to reduce their emissions. And we're fighting with all of our courage and energy, because on the African continent, climate change is a question of life and death. 22 million people are on the Horn of Africa are risk starving to death because of climate change right now as we speak. And the science tells us that with all the commitments we have seen here, the small commitments, we're heading to a world that is going to be 2.5 degrees warmer. And we won't be surprised when we get to Dubai that they tell us now it's 3 degrees. And 3 degrees average around the world, that's 7 degrees in Timbuktu. That's the Sahara Desert racing to the south, eating up the Congo Basin forests with sand. If temperatures go up 7 degrees in the Congo Basin, the forests will die. And that's then another 10 years of global emissions that are emitted. So then we go to a 5-degree world, and it's 12 degrees in Timbuktu. And so that scenario it's like a horror film from Hollywood. We will have 500 million climate refugees in Africa. The African continent will be destabilized. Kofi Annan said it in 2007, and we're still talking. But what the president just said was that we can also be part of the solution. Being from Gabon, being a carbon positive country, a rainforest country, we talk a lot about the Congo Basin, the forests. But across West Africa, we have vast areas that were once forest that can be replanted in some places. We have enormous potential for reforestation, recreating the ecosystem services. As a young man, I had the pleasure to work in Sierra Leone on a small project near the Liberia border, in a paradise. But today, much of the forest is gone, and the water, the rivers have dried up. So we have vast potential for reforestation, creating millions, tens, hundreds of millions of tons of carbon credits. And as the president said, that can contribute to the economy. The savanna ecosystems have huge potential for increasing soil carbon. And so, whilst we have to fight for this justice, we have to fight for the developed world to maintain their promises and to go further, we should also be looking at how we can contribute and holding this convention to their promises of REDD Plus and carbon finance. Because we have calculated that for Gabon, carbon could become 20% of our economy. And I think that's the case for many countries in Africa. And so, when I come to these negotiations, and I've been coming for a while now, I come to fight. Fight for justice, to fight to fight for our continent. And many of you here are younger than me, so you are the ones who actually have the problem to solve. We are of a certain age. So it's your fight. You have to be engaged, and I encourage you to fight with all your might. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Excellency. And to us youths, it is our fight. We have to fight with all our might. Now I'm going to pass it on to the Minister of Environment from Sierra Leone, Mr. Max. Sorry.
Well, maybe I'll say this in absentia. Your Excellency, President Kenyatta, colleague ministers, ladies, gentlemen, and the youth, I think this is for you. Good evening. This COP27 summit in Egypt comes in a year where we have seen severe weather extremes, food shortages, fossil fuel price hikes, and a rising cost of living, with Russia's fossil fuel financed war on Ukraine further stoking the crisis. So far this year, Sierra Leone and Africa as a whole have seen floods and storms, killing hundreds of people all over the continent, triggering electricity shortages, disrupting freight operations, and devastating homes and livelihoods. Meanwhile, drought has caused famine for millions of people in the Horn of Africa. This summit in general should aim to shift the focus from negotiations and planning to action on the ground. And this is very important. We have been talking too much for far too long. We need action now. This COP should ramp up adaptation to climate change impacts in parallel with emission reductions. It is expected to also highlight both Africa's need for immediate climate action and its role in facilitating and mobilizing action at a large scale. It needs to push countries, the private sector, and local governments to deliver on promises already made. It needs to strengthen them in line with science and help developing and emerging economies overcome barriers to finance and build long-term climate action capacity. And action should center around youth and future generations in its entirety. This is the more reason I am so happy to be here today to lend my voice on how green finance provides an opportunity for future generations. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I see green finance as the driver for the next wave of growth in supporting the country's climate strategies enshrined in their nationally determined contributions, strategic and holistic approach towards everlasting sustainability. Africa is blessed with assets that attract green financing, and carbon credit is one such asset my country has visioned as green finance alongside the available green finance available at the global scale. Africa as a whole has a long stretch, especially the western part of Africa, a large stretch of coastal areas with mangroves, and Sierra Leone in particular has over 700,000 acres and between 50 to 200 tons of carbon that is sequestered in each acre of carbon. Such an asset is believed to be green financing that can attract millions of dollars to implement climate actions. That is national adaptation plan and additional and unconditional nationally determined contribution. However, we need to use our public funding intelligently to create buy-in from the private sector. The green transition is our prosperity strategy. Thus, a global approach to the carbon credit mechanism is paramount to promoting green investment. Such an opportunity will preserve a global level playing field for all. And we must set the right incentives at the global level to help secure funds to implement our climate actions for the future generation. That is why my country intends to introduce a carbon policy mechanism to take advantage of such green finance to be sustainable for our youth and future generations. This is needed to ensure that a level playing field is achieved, and I want to believe Professor White here will help us in that direction. Ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, I want to share some key highlights of what I believe COP27 needs to deliver around today's theme of discussion. And this includes one, this COP27 needs to deliver on finance. Wealthy nations need to show that they are working to meet their promise to mobilize $100 billion per year in public and private climate finance by 2030. And they also need to set out gains to scale it up and also create an avenue for green finance for vulnerability countries to implement climate action that centers around youth and our future generation. 2. Emission cuts. In COP26, decision was made that national emission reduction plans need to be aligned with the 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature limit, and most major polluters committed to reaching that zero emission by mid-century. We wait to see whether that comes to fruition. Thus, as bigger emitters seek to fulfill their climate reduction policies through the carbon credit mechanism, I hope that some concrete action is taken in shifting to the implementation of fast-growing renewable energy schemes. And 3, crisis support. COP27 needs to deliver a financial support framework for countries being repeatedly battered by the impacts of climate change, food system disruption, fossil fuel price spikes, and other shocks. Many developing and emerging economies are struggling with mounting debt and can't secure insurance coverage commensurate with the risks posed by climate change. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to thank the organizers and our youths for the invite and wish to assure our government's commitment in prioritizing climate action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And now we're happy to have been joined by the Minister from Uganda. Thank you very much for joining us, Ma. And we'll now hear from the Minister of Environment of Liberia.
Thank you very much. Good evening to our young people, organizers of this forum. I want to say good evening to my colleague at the right, young brother next door, photo from Sierra Leone, sister from Uganda, and welcome to all of you out here. I think Dr. Boy has put it straight. We have to fight. A few hours ago, I was in a forum. We were talking about climate finance, green bonds, capital foundation, all of that. But we are trying to find a situation we did not cause. We didn't cause it. Dr. White comes from a forest nation, Gabon. He and I from a region in West Africa. In Liberia, we have the Upper Guinea forest. All of Africa, the greenhouse gas emission, we do less than 4% of the world, the global emission. But we are responsible for the world to breathe. And in order for us to allow the world to breathe, we have to make sure we adapt to all of these things that they do. They say mitigation, but we prefer to adapt. But to adapt, they require resources. So we go to them for resources and they tell us, we give you concessional rates. Theoretically, it doesn't make sense because I'm telling you what you get to me, I'm trying to fix it. I can't pay for it. But the point here is, we ourselves, as Africans, we have to face up to the same. And we have to fight. And like Dr. White said, what I said, we have the carbon sequestration. What we have, the sponge that we have, we cannot absorb it. If we're absorbing, if we're using the sponge, the carbon stock that we have, in the case of Liberia, based on, as compared to our emission, it will take 10,750 years to exhaust it. That's not this generation. So, like the wife from Gabon, or from Sierra Leone, we in Liberia are sitting on about 6.6 million hectares of forest, rainforest, approximately 300 tons per each. That will give you about 2.2 billion. If we took the floor price that was call it $25 and just do 20% of that, I'll be holding close to $10.9 billion. So our way is a carbon line. But for us in Africa, especially in Liberia, we want to make sure that there is an organized architecture for trading carbon. That's why when President Weah went to Glasgow last year, he talked about the possibility of putting in place a carbon trading mechanism. We are in discussion with the major party state name, I cannot say, that is voluntary to help us put in place the structure. And when that structure is in place, it provides the safeguards, the standards, the procedures, so that the issue of accountability and transparency can be covered. The integrity of the system depends on the rules that you put in. Fortunately, in the case of Liberia, we have a constitution that guarantees the sanctity of contract. If you sign a contract with someone, our constitution requires that you follow that contract. You cannot get out of the contract. Not even a court can throw away the contract unless there is factual defect to the contract. You say, oh, I'm walking away. No. You can't even have a government in Liberia that will say, you know what, Dr. White, for the Moriba, the contract we had in the last government, I don't like it. I'm going to throw it out. The constitution of Liberia forbids you from government. So, for the system to have integrity, those are the safeguards of the contract. Then the question is, what's the prospects? Yes, we want to sell carbon credit, but we want to make sure the benefits of those credits are invested in the future tomorrow. I come from a country where 65% of the population is below the age of 35. 35. Every 100 persons in Liberia, 65 persons were born after 1987. That is a huge. So our approach is whatever resources that come from carbon trading must be invested into four things. The first is education. The second is education. The third is education. And the fourth is education. Because when the young people are educated, they can do anything. People say, oh, I should do infrastructure. When you build, let's say you build a shopping mall, and there is a stairway, it's called an escalator. The guy's not educated. He's not going to ride. But you educate our young people. Put the money into education. Let them understand. And on this score, and I'm asking our young people and our police and our government, half of my police are here, our sisters from Uganda, our young people must be in the forefront of the fight. Let them understand what is involved. Then they themselves can be involved. Because if we do not involve them, it will create a problem. In the case of Liberia, we do not have a choice. We do not have a choice. I have a delegation here, half of whom are young people. So we wanted to understand what is it to the continent, what is it that they need to do, because they understand it, and when they understand it and take ownership of it, they will be there. The other thing, to make sure our young people are also involved, any project that goes to Liberia, regardless of how much it is that they get and where it comes from the level of the conception of the project to the formulation and operation of the project, it must involve our young people. It must have a relevance to our national development policy. Anything that does not have a relevance or does not speak to our national development policy, you can keep the money in. Because if you don't do that, then the benefit of the investment that you are making will not be in the field of our youth. This is why about what you have in integrity, you have the system to be there, you have international standards. We found carbon credit, the freedom of the resources to be invested on education. So that people understand. Because the people who pollute, and what I learned from our police, they call them polluter pay principle. But when it comes to green funders, they don't want to do that. They want to turn the money into philanthropic gifts. And if somebody is asking you for something and you decide, well, I will do it voluntarily, it doesn't work out. We as Africans will have to do it. You said correctly, our people must be able to join the fight. You young people are added to the bubble, you add to the fight. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that powerful lecture, Your Excellency. And now to you, the Minister of Environment of Uganda. I would like to hear your remarks and insights on this topic.
Thank you very much. I am not the Minister of Environment, but I think in 2016 I was the Minister of Environment then. Then in 2019 I became the Minister of Energy. And now I'm the Minister of Ceremonial Affairs. So I have history of having moved on several ministries. I think the one that I've not yet gone to is the one of youth. Now, I must thank the organizers of this very important debate for inviting me to speak at this very important event concerning the youth. Now, I must say that under climate change action, issues of the youth have not really been brought to the level where they should. Now, Africa as a continent, we are a continent with the youngest population in the whole world. If I can give an example of Uganda, 70% of Ugandans are youth. So the other 30 are us. But it is the 70 are the youth and children. Now, Africa as a continent, I think as my brother of Sierra Leone, Liberia, you were mentioning about emissions. Africa as a continent, in this game of climate change and emissions, we emit zero almost. It is significant. Like for Uganda, I think we are 0.000 point whatever, we are below there. So in terms of emissions, we don't emit any gases, so we are not doing any damage. But the impacts that we are feeling are enormous. The impacts that we are feeling are enormous. And whenever we come here, we have come now like the youth. You will be the people to bear the brunt of what we are doing now. Because you are the future. So I'm happy that you have organized yourselves. You've realized and you are all coming together to speak. But please, when you speak, be very strategic. Don't come here because you are excited to board a plane and come here. But know that what we are doing will affect you in the future. Now, I will be talking mostly about Uganda. Because we have, as I said, our population is very young. And we have done a lot of affirmative action. And under climate financing, when we talk of developing nations, innovations are still very limited, even in financing. Even our own governments. Minister of Environment, how big is your budget before we talk about other? Okay. I used to be a Minister of Environment, but my budget would be when the big guys have got the agriculture, the water, have all got, now they will think of environment. But I remember that time I was very outspoken. And by the way, I used to work in the Environment Authority for 15 years. So I'm a minister who has had hands-on. And now I'm on the political side to make decisions. So I said, I gave warnings that you build the roads, build this, but if you don't take care of the environment, the floods will come. And as I speak this year, the Minister of Works lifted his hand and said, I cannot manage anymore. I said, I told you. The one of agriculture, all the fields had been flooded. So all our budgets had to be taken to buy food because first priority is to save the nations. So when we come to such conferences, for us as Africans, let's not fear, but let's speak out. Let's be organized and speak with a bigger voice. Now the youth of Africa. Don't speak like those of Uganda speaking this, those of Kenya. Can we have a unified voice coming from you. Because, like he has said, we need education, we need innovations. In Uganda, we've put our president, by the way, I think he won an award here for being the one who has piloted the electric motorbike. Most of our youth are employed in that. So now the electric motorbikes will be able to cut down on the emissions, which we don't have, by the way. The emissions are not there. But we are doing that. So really, we need to also be, when we talk of financing, let them loosen these strings which they put, but provide money willingly so that we can be able to promote that. Now, the youth actually in Africa are very innovative, and they could be able to do a lot if they were given the chance. So, I'm a minister of Karamoja, and I think my youth are the most problematic in Uganda. I had one, but I think he has gone in another. They have feathers on their head to show that they are youth. They are warriors. So these are warrior youth. Now you don't take care of them, they get guns, and they have really given us sleepless nights. So that's why we have said no, we have to take priority for the youth. So in Uganda, we have a ministry dedicated for youth with a budget. We have an innovation fund for youth. Now, also other issues have been put in place to make sure that our youth are taken care of in terms of also giving them free education. For the girls, we have affirmative action. For those who are going to the university, they already have points ahead of the boys. So we are really trying to see that the youth are well managed. But otherwise, I implore you, youth, don't keep quiet. Join this climate change campaign and participate effectively. And your governments, support them. And once you are given education, be innovative. And also as Africa, let's also promote adaptation. Because we don't have the emissions, so mitigations may not work, but adaptation is another area where we can work. So that is what I wanted to share from Uganda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we have all been inspired. I know I have been, and we really appreciate you being here with us. Now I'll open the floor to the audience to get 2 questions for our esteemed guests.
Name, organization, country, and question.
Thank you very much. My name is Mark Ivan Van Boy. I am the national president of the Catholic Youth Organization CYO Sierra Leone. Yesterday, I had the privilege to have a roundtable discussion with the German Chancellor, Mr. Scholz. The meeting was organized by the German youths in solidarity with their counterparts in the global North and South. And they wanted us to be there to checkmate with the German Chancellor about his activities and his prior commitment as opposed to what is happening now. Last year, all of you were at the COP26, and the European countries signed the Clean Energy Pact. Just about the close of the year 2022, we see the German Chancellor going to South Africa, to Senegal, and signing new contracts to extract fossil fuels, which is against the agreement that he signed and promised to support. So I asked him whether he would consider to reverse his decision to financing fossil fuels. His answer was obviously a no. And now he says, because of the war with Ukraine and Russia, that one has disrupted the transmission of gas for Europe, particularly Germany. And so he would rather continue to invest in fossil fuels for 24 to 25 years. Now, my worry is with President Sall. He wasn't there, but what gives him the courage to go into such agreement knowing fully well the consequences it will bring to the African nation. Now, we are really just young people. Our goal is imitation. As young people, we pretend that we don't know anything. We look at what you do and we copy you. So if you have said one thing and you're actually doing the complete opposite, what future are you living with us? So we will copy you exactly as you are behaving, and that is what will transfer from one generation to the other. So now that you are here, President Sall is not here. What is the interest of Africa in all of this? Is it the package or the future to be safe? Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll take one more question.
Thank you very much. My name is Shamim Wasinyanda. I'm from Tanzania, a proud environmental activist and social scientist. And my question is, as a young person, I'm scared for the future. And not only my future, but for the future of those who are not even 5 years old or 3 years old. So the question goes that we are talking about this being the African COP, as it has been nicknamed. But looking at the finances and the youth accessing those finances, how are you as African leaders making sure that we as African young people are able to access those finances? And once we access those finances, are those finances being channeled towards the right direction? And another thing is that we as young people, we have great minds. Why is it impossible for the world leaders, for the ministers to stand with us and support us in all these actions, in all these activism? Because I believe activism is the change of everything. Because if I see somebody talking about something, that will be able to encourage me to channel my wordings or to channel everything towards change. So what are we doing as African leaders to ensure that we support African activists who are really working day in, day out to ensure that we have climate justice, to ensure that we have climate finance, to ensure that loss and damage is financed as well? What are we making sure to ensure that young people, women, are also being given a table and not just ticking the boxes that young people were here, the female gender was here in this room? How are we going to make sure that that is more sustainable, especially when it comes to the continent of Africa? Because the continent of Africa is rich with natural resources, and we need to utilize that in order to ensure that we fight this together. Because if we succeed together, and if we fail together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'll pass it to our esteemed guest to respond to the questions.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. I think those are very good questions. I can begin, I think, with a young man. You said you were in the meeting with the German Chancellor, and he was advocating for proper climate change interventions. Then on the other hand, he's in Africa signing contracts for getting more fossil fuel. I think many of you must have read, I think also Tanzania, we are in this together. You must have read about the eco pipeline for Uganda and Tanzania. Now, one thing, you are activists, not so. But one thing I have to tell you is, as an activist, also be very strategic with the proper information to lobby governments. Now, what we see, the activists, is you come and then you say, Uganda and Tanzania, stop.
But remember, our emissions are below. We never damaged any environment. And this eco pipeline, for us, we are within our limit. We are not the ones who emitted to go beyond what. Now, the way also we are doing this, there are so many preparations to prevent, under environment. You normally prepare and do a cost-benefit analysis. When I'm going to do this, what are the costs? What are the benefits? Now, if the benefits outweigh the costs under the climate change agreement, I'm allowed to go on with the project, but minimizing on the costs. And that's what we did in Uganda under Tanzania. At that time, I was a Minister of Energy. And also as a person who has a PhD in environment. We did our best. So that project in Uganda has no problem on the environment. Now, you are right to put us to question and say, why are you doing this? At the same time, you are saying this. Of course, my dear sons and my daughter, you are not going to stop fossil fuel today. At least, if I'm still alive, it might go on for a good 50 years. Because you don't have the alternatives. You don't have the alternatives. If you say you stopped fossil fuel, are you able to fly these planes up? No. You still need fossil fuel. So what we have to do as activists, we have to say, well, who is that one who is doing too much? Now greed, those who are also going beyond, those who are emitting too much. But for us in Africa who are within the limit, I think we should not really be punched so high. So that's why we've said for us with ECOP, it is well prepared. And those who are making, you can come and you see, we are within the limits. We've never emitted any of those emissions. And indeed, our youth need jobs. We need to sell our resources, which are there. Actually, I'm a minister of Karamoja. There is even more fuel in the Karamoja belt for Africa. So now we need to go on the drawing board and look at Africa vis-a-vis those who are already developed. But also as we speak, I've already heard that other countries, especially in the developing world, are already also getting new blocks to begin looking for new fuel. And reason being that because of the war, so we need to look at now more innovations, even the use of fossil fuel. Is there a better way? And that's where we are tasking you, the youth, to do more science, do more research. Because you are not going to close fuel tomorrow, but is there a way we can use fuel without damaging the environment further? That should be another area where we can invest in as research. So I think that's where I can be very bold to tell you that certain things, as an activist, know what can be stopped and what, well, you try to lobby, and don't also suffocate us so much, Africa. We've never emitted. So me with Tanzania, we have never emitted anything. Now you say stop your fuel. It is like you are choking us, Uganda, to really put us back. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me start with my brother from Sierra Leone. I think that is very unfortunate, I must say. If we say we are continuing to use fossil fuel, as the minister was saying, it's going to take quite some time, but we should start stopping the use. And that is why Sierra Leone as a country, we have embarked on renewable energy. We have solar, we are planting a lot of mini grids using hydroelectric power. And we have projects in mind wherein the use of fossil fuel in vehicles will be minimized. We don't have the capacity to have the electric cars as is in the West. But please take note, the West, they are polluting more, as everybody is saying. And then they want to continue to pollute more. Do you know the reason? Because they want to control the economy. That is all. So it is wrong to say one thing and do another. But the bottom line is we should start to do the right thing, because when are we going to start to do the right thing if we don't start now? The youths in Sierra Leone, just like my sister was saying, it's about 70% of the population. And we see youths on the street. They are suffering. Drugs, crime rate is increasing because they are not engaged. So I believe the reason, the suggestion we have is engaging the youths. And we have the Ministry of Youth Affairs that is doing extremely well in providing jobs for the youths. There are a lot of projects going on. But as my sister there was saying, access to funds. If you look at the budget for the Ministry of the Environment compared to other ministries, it's nothing. But please take note that climate change or environment is new. For example, in Sierra Leone, this ministry was only established about 3 years ago. We never had a Ministry of the Environment. So it takes time to educate people. And education is very paramount. That is why we are planning to introduce environmental issues, climate change issues in the school curriculum. Where in children, 3-5, they start learning about environmental issues. And I believe what kids learn in school is gospel truth. So, as a government, you should be seen doing the right thing in the right direction. And that is why our government is called the New Direction Government. You talked about activism. Yes, as Professor White was saying, we have to be bold enough to fight. Because if we don't do that, we have ourselves to blame, or our children, or our great-great-grandchildren. And in Sierra Leone, for women in particular, we have empowered the women. Now there was an women empowerment bill that passed in Parliament, where in 30% of women are involved, even in Parliament. I think that is the right thing to do, and we are moving in the right direction.
Thank you very much. Now I'd just like to ask for your final words to the youths before we close.
Thank you very much. Can I read this? Oh, somebody just sent me a question. Maybe I can answer that. Why does Sierra Leone not have a pavilion this year? Last year in Glasgow, we had a pavilion. And that's exactly what I'm saying, resources. We could not afford pavilion this year. Last year was extremely expensive. Next year we'll have one, and I think the right thing to do is to apply for maybe a grant or project. We can have a pavilion. But I promise that next year we'll try to have one. It was very good last year when we had a pavilion. That's where we are meeting. But this year, the pavilions here, the big ones, are $500,000. $500,000. That's huge for an economy like ours. One has to be realistic. Now to the youths, be rest assured that we are with you in this, and we'll fight with you to ensure that this environment that belongs to all of us is taken care of. And that is why, as a government, we are putting in measures. For example, renewable energy, planting trees, restoring the mangroves. These are all things we are putting in place so that our environment will be safer for generations to come. Thank you very much.
Also, finally, I wish to thank the organizers of this event, and I implore the youth who are activists that continue advocating for the protection of the environment, continue advocating for inclusion of Africa, and also continue advocating for people to know the impacts that we are bearing as Africa. And yet, on the side of emissions, our emissions are almost not there. So, also as youth activists, I implore you to be in the science. And as you advocate, put also in your mind, I'm talking those from Africa, to know that as you fight, put Africa on the forefront. Because together we can stand once we are united, and let's fight for the better of Africa in terms of development. Because if we just fight that we cut down the emissions and what, and when we have the poorest, we are the continent with the highest percentage of the poor, we need to be mindful that we also need to advocate for a share for our people to use our resources and get out of poverty. Thank you very much.
Thank you so